My family always said I was too sensitive right up until the sheriff walked onto their porch with papers that had my name on them. No screaming, no warning, just the sound of their world cracking while they stared at me like I'd rewritten the rules overnight. I didn't argue. I didn't comfort them. I simply stepped aside and let the truth land. Because a week earlier at the Denver airport, I learned exactly what my parents thought of me. One canceled ticket, 2 text messages, and the moment I read them, everything in our family shifted. Before we go on, hit like and tell me where you're listening from. And if family's ever pushed you too far, share it below your stories. Remind me none of us face this alone. If you'd met me a few years ago, you might have assumed I came from one of those warm, noisy families that crowd diner booths on Sunday mornings. People used to tell me I had a gentle face, the kind that must have grown up around affection. I never corrected them. It was easier than explaining the truth that my family loved control far more than they ever loved me. Growing up, my mother treated my older sister Leah like a limited edition prize. Leah got the new clothes, the decorated bedroom, the framed photos covering every hallway. I got lectures about gratitude hand-me-downs from neighbors and a spot on the floor during holidays when chairs were for guests. My father wasn't the one who started the fire, but he always stood close enough to warm his hands. He'd smirk, shrug, or pretend he didn't hear the comments that stung the most. That was his way of choosing a side. By the time I left for college, I'd already been kicked out of that house twice once, for talking back once, because Leah didn't like sharing the bathroom. Winters near Denver hit differently when you're standing outside with a trash bag full of clothes at 17. But surviving that taught me something. If I wanted safety, I'd have to build it myself. So I did, quietly. I worked through school, took every internship nobody else wanted, studied financial planning late at night in a campus library that smelled like old carpet and burnt microwave popcorn. Years later, when I finally moved into my small condo overlooking the lake, it wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The concierge knew my name. My son, 6 years old and soft-spoken, finally had a bedroom where no one told him to stay out of the way. He's the only person in my life who never made me feel like I took up too much space. My parents never understood that my distance wasn't rebellion, it was protection. Even after I became a financial consultant, even after I bought the condo and built a life from nothing, they still treated me like the backup child. Leah remained the star. The golden daughter with the perfect husband, the curated social feeds, the family who bent over backward to please her. So when I saved for a short trip, a tiny break I'd earned myself, I didn't tell anyone. Not my mother, not my father, not even Leah. I just wanted a few quiet days where no one could reach me, demand from me, or diminish me. But secrets don't survive long in my family, and the moment my mother found out I was leaving town, everything started to unravel. The morning of my trip felt strangely calm, the kind of quiet where you start to believe, maybe, just maybe, the universe is giving you a break. I left my condo early, kissed my son goodbye, and told him I'd bring back something small from the airport gift shop. He waved from the doorway, his hair still messy from sleep, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to exhale. Denver International was its usual mosaic of rolling suitcases, coffee steam, and half-awake travelers. I blended right in jeans, a long coat, hair pulled back. Nothing about me suggested anything unusual. Nothing suggested that within minutes, everything I believed about my family would split open. When I reached the check-in counter, I handed over my ID and confirmation code, already imagining how good it would feel to turn off my phone once I boarded. The agent scanned my ticket, paused, then scanned it again. Her eyebrows pulled together in a way I immediately recognized. Not confusion, but discomfort. Let me just check something, she said, fingers tapping her keyboard faster. A knot tightened under my ribs. Is something wrong? She turned the screen slightly toward me. Your ticket shows as canceled. The refund was issued an hour ago. The word canceled hit me like a dropped suitcase. No, that's not possible. I didn't cancel anything. The refund went to a card ending in... She hesitated before finishing the sentence. 4401. My stomach fell straight through the airport floor because I knew exactly who owned that card. My mother. I thanked the agent somehow and stepped aside the terminal, suddenly louder, brighter, harsher. My phone buzzed the second I pulled it from my bag. A text preview lit up the screen. From Mom, have fun walking home, loser. Loser. She didn't even dress it up in a joke or a half-hearted emoji. Just the word sharp as broken glass. Another buzz. From Dad. Stop acting poor. Take a bus like you should. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Travelers moved around me like a river, and for a second, I wasn't sure if I was standing still or drowning. It wasn't the canceled ticket. It wasn't even the insults. It was the clarity that came with them, the realization that my parents didn't just treat me like a burden, they enjoyed it. They wanted me small. They needed me small. I walked out of the terminal into the cold air, not knowing where I was going, only that I couldn't stay there another second. My fingers shook as I opened a rideshare app, but before I could finish typing my address, a small white sedan pulled up. The driver leaned out the window. "You all right?" he asked. "You look like someone just dropped a piano on your day." I let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Close. A text. He nodded in a way that said he'd seen enough life to read between lines. "Hop in. I'm off shift, but you look like you need to be anywhere but here." I hesitated only a heartbeat before sliding into the passenger seat. The car smelled faintly of pine and old leather. He introduced himself to Harvey, a part-time driver who'd lived in Denver his whole life, and then he just listened. No judgment, no interruptions. I found myself telling him about the canceled ticket, the texts, the years of swallowing comments I should have screamed back at. When we finally parked near a quiet city park, he rested his hands on the steering wheel. "You know," he said gently, "people pretend cruelty is love all the time. Doesn't make it true." I looked out through the windshield, watching the winter light flicker through bare branches. I took out my phone again, but this time not to read their words. I opened the folder I kept hidden for years, one labeled Options, investments, payments, the trust deed, records of every month they were late with rent on the house they didn't even know I owned. For the first time, I whispered to myself, the anger isn't swallowing me, it's sharpening me. When Harvey dropped me off near my building, the morning chill had turned sharper, the kind that wakes you up completely. I thanked him, promised I'd be okay, and walked toward the entrance with the strange steadiness of someone whose mind had finally stopped spinning. My condo lobby was warm and quiet, humming faintly with the radiator's breath. It felt like stepping into a different universe, one where I didn't have to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. I hung my coat, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The folder labeled Options waited where I'd left it, a silent archive of the life my family never bothered to ask about. I clicked it open and the screen filled with years' worth of documents, investment notes, property payments, the trust deed, listing me as the owner of the house my parents had lived in for nearly 2 years. I scrolled slowly, breathing in the reality I'd built while they were busy dismissing me. Every page felt like a reminder that I had done something extraordinary without their approval or permission. They thought I lived poor because I drove an old car and wore simple clothes. They never imagined I kept my life quiet to protect it from them. But the texts at the airport made one thing painfully clear: protecting myself wasn't enough anymore. I needed to protect my son. I needed to stop pretending their cruelty was something I could outgrow. Memories rose, uninvited but vivid. Leah, my sister, shoving me toward the door one winter night because her boyfriend didn't like extra people around. My mother telling me to stop being dramatic while I stood outside in the cold with a backpack. My father handing Leah cash on her college move-in day, then turning to me with a lecture about earning things the right way. All those moments blended into a quiet, simmering truth. I couldn't keep letting them take from me piece by piece and call it family. I opened another file, a set of recordings I'd captured the last time I stopped by their house to drop off a receipt. I hadn't meant to record anything. I tucked a small baby monitor in my bag because I didn't trust leaving my belongings unattended. But when I played the first clip, their voices filled my kitchen. "She thinks she's better than us," my mother said. "Cancel it, teach her a lesson. She can take the bus," my father added. "She always acts like she's struggling. Maybe she should." Their laughter followed light and casual, the way people talk about inconveniencing a stranger, not their daughter. I sat back in my chair, letting the anger settle, not hot and wild like before, but cold and precise. I wasn't going to fight them with insults. I wasn't going to match their cruelty. I was going to use the very thing they underestimated most about me: preparation. By the afternoon, I had drafted 3 eviction notices, one for each adult living in the house. I double-checked the lease terms, the payment history, the violation notes, every signature they had ever put down without reading. Everything was airtight. As the sun set behind the lake outside my window, painting the sky in muted rose and gold, I slid the notices into a plain envelope. My hands didn't shake this time. For years, they'd told me I was too soft, too quiet, too willing to forgive. Maybe they were right. But softness isn't weakness. Not when it finally chooses itself. I placed the envelope on my counter, took one steady breath, and whispered to the empty room, "I'm not going back as their daughter. I'm going back as their landlord." 3 days after the airport, I stood at the end of my parents' walkway, staring at the house I used to tiptoe through. The lawn hadn't been mowed. The porch light flickered, and Leah's SUV sat crooked in the driveway like she'd parked in a hurry, probably because she always assumed someone else would fix things for her. I tightened my coat around me and walked up the steps. I didn't knock. I turned the handle and stepped inside, the familiar scent of lemon cleaner and stale coffee hitting me all at once. My mother was on the couch scrolling through her phone. My father was in the kitchen making a sandwich. Leah was at the island, filing her nails, bored and comfortable in a house that wasn't hers. My mother looked up first. "Why are you here?" No greeting, no concern. Just irritation, like I'd interrupted a commercial break. My father didn't glance up. "Shouldn't you be sulking somewhere? Heard your little trip fell apart," Leah smirked, tapping her nail file against the counter. "Yeah, thought you'd still be crying at the terminal. Guess the charity plane didn't leave without you." Their laughter, light careless, echoed through the open space. If they'd looked closely, they would have noticed my posture was different. My shoulders weren't curled in. My voice wasn't small. I wasn't a guest in this house anymore. I set my bag down on the hardwood floor, pulled out the plain envelope, and placed it on the counter in front of Leah. "What's that?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "Your notice," I said simply. "All of yours." My mother snorted. "Notice for what eviction?" The room went silent. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to pause. I set 3 identical papers in 3 different places, one on the counter, one on the fridge, and one on the bottom stair. My father stepped forward, ripping the one from the refrigerator door. "You don't own this house." "Oh," I reached into the envelope again and pulled out the trust deed. "You signed a lease 2 years ago with Elmbrook Trust." My mother folded her arms. "We thought that was some management company." "It is," I said. "Mine." My father's face darkened. "This is ridiculous. You can't evict your own family." I tilted my head. "You already did, remember, twice before I turned 20. Leah rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. You don't have the money to own a house." "Interesting theory," I said, "because the payments, the bills, the statements, and your signed lease say otherwise." My mother stepped closer, voice rising. "This is a joke. You think you can scare us with paper? We raised you." "No," I said calmly. "You controlled me. You drained me. And you punished me for having a life you didn't approve of." My father threw the eviction notice onto the counter. "Even if this is real, you don't have grounds." I pressed play on my phone. A recording filled the kitchen, the same conversation I'd listened to alone at my condo. Mom's voice. "Cancel it. Teach her a lesson." Dad's voice. "She can take the bus. She's always so dramatic." Then their laughter. Leah stiffened. "You recorded us, so," I said. "I recorded my property being occupied by tenants who violated their lease and used emotional abuse to control me." My mother's face drained of color. "Turn that off." But the recording played on their words, echoing sharply against the tile backsplash. Leah slammed her hand on the counter. "You can't kick us out. I have kids. We're a family." "Exactly," I said. "A family you didn't think twice about putting above my son when you told him to sit on the floor last Christmas because he wasn't a real cousin." Leah opened her mouth, but a new sound cut through the tension, my phone buzzing. A notification. Payment received from Leah Baxter. Leah lunged forward. You said the rent was delayed. It was, unless you'd apologize for laughing when I fell down the stairs holding gifts for your children. Her jaw tightened. You're unbelievable. No, I said softly. I'm consistent. My father tried again. Where do you expect us to go? I gave you 60 days notice on paper, I said. You ignored it. You're 3 months behind, and you sent me those texts. I met his eyes. If a landlord got those from a tenant, you know what would happen. You're punishing us for one joke, Leah snapped. That wasn't a joke, I said. It was a confession. My mother grabbed the counter for balance. Lucia, be reasonable. Reasonable, I repeated. You canceled my ticket. You called me a loser. You told me to walk home, and you enjoyed it. My father's voice cracked. You're really doing this. I opened the envelope one last time, pulled out the final sheet, and placed it in the center of the island. Their faces went pale when I slid that paper across the counter. It was the formal notice of enforcement, the document that allowed the sheriff to act. This, I said, is already filed. You have 3 days. My mother shook her head, tears forming not remorse but panic. We didn't mean to hurt you. Yes, I said quietly. You did. You just never expected consequences. Leah looked around the room, suddenly small in the house she'd treated like her kingdom. What are you trying to prove? That I matter, I said, and that my son deserves better than watching his mother get treated like an unpaid servant. My father threw his hands up. Unbelievable. I picked up my bag. 3 days. The sheriff will handle the rest. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard my mother whisper, What happened to you? I paused. I stopped begging for a seat at a table I paid for. Then I walked away while they stood frozen in the doorway, their lives finally catching up to the choices they made. 3 days passed faster than any of us expected. On Thursday morning, a sheriff's car rolled up the street, quiet but unmistakable. My parents stood on the porch with half-packed boxes, their faces tight with disbelief as if the world owed them a pause that never came. Leah wasn't there. She'd left the night before, dragging her suitcases down the driveway while arguing with her husband on the phone about the money she'd used without telling him. The sheriff walked them through the process calmly, giving them space to gather the last of their things. There was no yelling, no dramatic fight, just the slow unraveling of a family that had spent years pretending their cruelty was normal. My mother tried one last time, reaching for my arm as movers carried out her boxes. Lucia, she whispered, we're still your parents. I stepped back. And I'm still the daughter you never protected. She looked down, not at me, but at the house behind us, at what she thought she'd keep forever. When everything was cleared out, I left the sheriff a sealed envelope to place inside. A photo of me and my son smiling. On the back, one line, "This is the family I choose." When I finally drove back to my condo that evening, the lake outside my window was still and bright, reflecting a peace I hadn't felt in years. My phone buzzed once, an unread text from Leah, but I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The airport, the canceled ticket, the insults, all of it had led me here to the moment I stopped letting their version of family define my worth. My son ran to the door when I walked in, arms wide, certain of me in a way my parents never were. That was enough. If you've ever had to reclaim your peace from the people who should have protected it, tell me in the comments. And hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story.